Hi class, welcome to the video this week for chapter 7 and chapter 9. Before I start, I just want to say that I've enjoyed reading everyone's papers so far and seeing all their observations and applications that they've found in their lives. It's been really fun to see what people have discovered about themselves and about their families and people around them as they've read through the chapters and had these class discussions. It's just been fascinating to me to see even people making life changes based off of these observations that they've had when they've been learning. So first of all, we're going to talk about chapter 7 is cognitive dissonance, and it's based on studies done by Leon Festinger. And this is within the intrapersonal area, which means that it's focusing on the self. So the definition of cognitive dissonance is feelings of discomfort resulting from inconsistent attitudes, thoughts, and behavior. So looking at the figure 7.1 on page 114, they have a little chart that shows you how cognitive dissonance works. So you have the inconsistency, which leads to feelings of dissonance, which leads to that unpleasant feeling, whether it's stress or anxiety or just uncomfortableness, which leads to the desire to remove that dissonance, usually through change. So why exactly do we do the things we do? And I come up with a list that we'll be kind of talking about a little bit that goes along with this cognitive dissonance. So we have people like reformers, people that join the picket lines, breakups, family fights. Why do we hang out with the people that we do or not hang out with certain people? And we'll get to that towards the end. But just kind of be thinking about that as we talk about cognitive dissonance. So we have this desire to have a consistency with our beliefs and attitudes and thoughts. And this is in regards to things that we're doing in our lives, even like where we're going to church or what books we're reading, television we're watching, the types of people that we spend our time with. All of those things have to be consistent with our beliefs and attitudes and thoughts. And if they're not, then we encounter this dissonance. We have to feel good about it in order to do it or be a part of it. It needs to be consistent with those beliefs or we feel like we can't do it. And you can kind of look at that figure 7.2 on 116, and it gives you an example about how you have a particular belief which leads you to a certain attitude or behavior. So briefly, here's some terminology for the chapter. So we have the magnitude of the dissonance, which is the actual amount of dissonance. We have the importance of it. How much does it really matter? The dissonance ratio. Are there more pros or cons or more positives or negatives? And the rationale, which is why is there dissonance? So all of these things factor into the feeling of dissonance that we have and whether or not it's there and how strong it is. So an interesting thing to think about is sometimes cognitive dissonance is a learning device for us. We're introduced to new things that don't exactly fit into our preconceived beliefs, and then we have this cognitive dilemma or dissonance about whether or not it's something that we should believe. And the only way to resolve that is by reducing the dissonance, which we'll talk about in just a second. So to give you kind of an example of that, and not a very good example, would be to think about the first scientist that ever came up with the idea that the world was round. So he goes to the public or to other scientists and introduces this concept, the world is round, and people have this cognitive dilemma or this dissonance thinking, what are you talking about? We've never thought that the world was round before, why would we consider that now? So in order to reduce that dissonance, there's two things that we can do. We can change either our actions or beliefs so that they comply with the new things that we've learned, or we can choose not to change, and we can try to reduce those feelings of dissonance by a couple of different ways. You have selective exposure, where you're looking for information that is consistent with your beliefs and you don't pay attention to other things that aren't consistent, which brings us to the next one, paying attention to what is consistent. Selective interpretation, we adapt it to our own way of thinking. And I'm sure you've all had those experiences where you're talking to somebody and they don't agree with you, and it seems like everything you say, they twist your words to adapt it to what they want you to say, or how they want you to say it. So they just twist things to interpret it. The next one is selective retention. We only remember what we want to remember, and then by doing those things, we're reducing those feelings of dissonance, but we're not changing how we really feel about it, or our actions, or our beliefs. In the book, it shares an example about a girl who is trying to quit smoking. And she knows that it's not good for her, but she's come up with all of these different ways to make herself feel better about not quitting. So she tells herself, well, I don't smoke as much as my friends do, or I only smoke low tar cigarettes, so it's not as harmful, different things like that. So she's using these selective things to be able to reduce the feeling of dissonance she has about smoking, instead of actually changing her behavior and quitting smoking. So another example we have is buyer's remorse. Sometimes, I'm sure you've all experienced it, and if you haven't, good for you, because it's not a pleasant feeling. When you go in and you buy something, usually it's big purchases, like a car or a house, and then afterwards you just, oh, why did I spend so much money on that? Should I have looked around more? Should I have gotten the warranty? Should I have not gotten the warranty? And you just have this dissonance. And as I was reading about that in the chapter, I was thinking about salesmen and how they can use our dissonance that we're feeling to their advantage. I was particularly thinking about alarm salesmen, because we have a lot of those come around our neighborhoods. And the first thing that they say when you open the door is to tell you all about all of the break-ins in the neighborhood. So-and-so down the street had a break-in, and 2 streets over there was another break-in, etc. And they get you nervous, and they create this dissonance for you, so that the only way to relieve it is in buying alarm. So I'm not encouraging these salesman tactics. I'm just saying that they're out there and that they're using it to their advantage, and watch out for that. Or maybe if you're a salesman, you can use that tactic, but don't come to my house. So back to what I was talking about at the beginning. I gave you that list of people, and I asked, why do these people do these things? And it all relates back to dissonance. So you've got reformers, or people that stand in the picket lines. And why are they doing these things? It's because they have this feeling of dissonance that something in the world is not how they believe it should be. So the only way to reduce that dissonance is by standing up for what they believe in and trying to change that. So then going on to the next example is breakups. You don't feel right about the relationship, or maybe the person's beliefs are not consistent with your beliefs, which leads to a breakup. You've got family fights, where you've got that conflict of beliefs or interest or whatever it is that's causing the family fight. Why do you hang out with the people that you do, or not hang out with others? Because their beliefs and attitudes and behaviors are not consistent with your beliefs and attitudes and behaviors. So you hang out with people that are going to reduce the amount of dissonance in your relationship. So that's what I have to say about that theory, which brings us to the second theory, which is in chapter 9, uncertainty reduction theory. And this one was based on the findings of Berger and Calabrese. And this one falls more under the category of interpersonal, which is the study of relationships. And the basic idea of that is right here. You have the initial encounter. When you meet somebody for the first time, maybe you're walking into a classroom, first day of school, and you're looking around the room and trying to decide where you're going to sit, and you pick out somebody that you think is going to be comfortable to sit next to. So when you make these initial encounters, you want to be able to make a prediction about that person, and you want to be able to make an explanation. So let's think more specific. You meet somebody in the grocery store. Say you're in line in the grocery store, someone comes up to you and starts talking to you, just small talk, and you have a little bit of uncertainty about it because you don't know this person, they're a complete stranger. And so your natural reaction is to be able to predict and explain. You want to predict what this person is going to do. People generally follow certain rules of social rules that you can kind of expect. When a person comes up to you, they're going to say, "Hi, how are you doing? What's up?" Whatever. And then you want to be able to explain that behavior. If they say a certain thing, you want to be able to explain to yourself why they're doing that certain thing. So based off that initial encounter, we have uncertainty. You have high uncertainty, which means that there are lots of explanations of why they could be acting a certain way or how they're going to act. And then you have low uncertainty, which means that there's limited explanations. So an example of high uncertainty is meeting somebody at the mall, somebody that you don't know, maybe somebody that is dressed in a manner that might be frightening to you, and there could be a million reasons why they are acting the way they are when you encounter them. And so that means your uncertainty is really high because you don't know what to expect. An example of the low uncertainty would be you walk into an elementary school and you meet a kindergarten teacher, for example, and you know that either A, this is going to happen, or B, this is going to happen, but you expect that there's not going to be a whole lot of variations there. So there's a couple types of uncertainty. You can have cognitive uncertainty, which is beliefs and attitudes. So you are curious about you don't know what you're thinking, you don't know what they're thinking, and you don't know how to act, which is more, I guess, behavioral. So you've got the thinking and then the actual how to act, which is the behavioral. So I already gave you that explanation of high uncertainty with lots of expectations, and we have a desire to reduce that uncertainty. And one of the ways to reduce that is to use communication. So there's a couple different ways that you can reduce that uncertainty. The first is proactive, when you plan ahead to avoid uncertainty. I know we've all had those experiences where you run into somebody that you know and you don't want to talk to them, so you avoid them. And then the other one is retroactive, where you are trying to analyze what actually took place in the conversation or happened. So you got the initial encounter, you make your prediction, you're trying to explain it, you meet that person, you have the desire to remove that uncertainty, whether it's your belief or your behavior, and you're unsure what to do, and that can lead to anxiety and stress. And to alleviate that, you have to increase the predictability. And how do we do that? by information seeking, asking questions.